second thing I think we need to look at when we look at those narratives is that they disagree on almost every detail. Let me walk you through them. Who went to the tomb at dawn on the first day of the week? We have 4 Gospels. We have 4 different lists. The only consistent figure in all 4 of them is Mary Magdalene. Did the women see the risen Lord in the garden at dawn on the first day of the week? No, says Mark. Yes, says Matthew. No, says Luke. Yes, says John. Even my friend Jerry Falwell can't make those fit together. It just won't work. It's a contradiction. Where were the disciples when they had this life-changing, in-breaking experience of resurrected power? Where were they? The Gospels don't even agree with that. Mark says it will be in Galilee. Matthew says it was in Galilee. Luke says it was never in Galilee. It was always in Jerusalem in the immediate environs. And John says it was in Jerusalem first. But then when he writes an appendix to his gospel in chapter 21, he makes a Galilean appearance much, much later. Indeed, it's hard to date the time, perhaps even years. Was the risen Christ physical? Well, Paul says he appeared. He never describes that appearance, so you don't get any data as to whether it was physical or not. Mark never describes the risen Christ appearing to anyone. Oh, there's a later addition to Mark that does, but in the authentic part of Mark's gospel, there is no appearance of the risen Christ to anyone. That's our earliest gospel. Matthew, who sort of seems to say it was a physical Jesus, that the women grabbed the feet of him in the garden on the morning of the resurrection. But then when he tells the story of Jesus appearing to the disciples, it's distinctly not physical. Jesus seems to come out of the heavens, clothed with the authority of the Son of Man. And he comes to give the disciples only their marching orders. Go into all the world and proclaim the gospel. It's only when you get to Luke and John, the last 2 Gospels, I would date them in the late 9th decade and the mid-10th decade. It's only in these latter Gospels that you begin to get appearances and empty tombs and all of the physical part of that resurrection story. But even here, Luke describes this Christ as having the ability to materialize on the road to Emmaus and to dematerialize after the breaking of the bread. That doesn't sound like any physicality that I understand. And John has the Christ have the ability to walk into a locked and barred upper room and still offer his physical wounds to Thomas to print, to feel, to touch, physicality. Were they trying to determine that the experience that they were having after the death of Jesus was in fact an experience of a living Christ who was identical with that Jesus? And that's the language that they used to describe it. There's no doubt in my mind that any of us would be here today talking about the resurrection if there weren't something real about it. But I think we've got to begin to open the Scriptures to scholarship, open them to a new understanding, so that we don't have to take 21st century minds and twist them into first century pretzels in order to be disciples of Jesus of Nazareth. Thank you very much.